Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, joined as I always am by Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. The Talkin Tide podcast available to you wherever you like to get your podcasts, also on YouTube and Facebook. You can catch us at our web host as well at megaphone.fm. A couple of quick thank yous to our sponsors, North River Dental Associates, Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa, and finally, DraftKings. Our Twitter feed, talking_tide. Get quick links to all our drops there. And we reconvene, Travis, here on a late June, a steamy evening in Tuscaloosa. I know you're down in Florida. I'm sure it's plenty hot down there. Been awful hot in Alabama as well. I've been doing a little traveling. We've taken a couple of weeks off here, but bouncing back, as it were, with SEC media days now, I guess just a few weeks out.
It is. Yeah, I've been down Crescent Beach, Florida, down here. Had a little ocean breeze today, Goodbread. I know you're relieved to hear that. So little cold drink, little ocean breeze. Wasn't too bad, but no, it's been largely pretty sweltering around the southeast. But you're right, man. For all this summer weather, it's starting to look and sound a lot more like football season right around the corner.
No question about it. Here in June, though, of late, Travis, basketball kind of took over the news here in the last week, or at least since you and I last podcasted with the NBA draft. Alabama places somebody in the NFL, in the NBA draft for the fifth consecutive year. Which is kind of a head shaker, Travis, if you think about it. It's been a long time, I think, since Alabama has strung together picks in 5 straight years. This time it's the freshman point guard, J.D. Davison, who decided to go one and done. He's selected by the Boston Celtics, number 53 overall in the second round, really just a few picks from the end of the draft. They only go 2 rounds in the NBA. What are your thoughts on this decision for this kid to make this jump at this time, with the hindsight of now knowing what the outcome was?
Yeah, kind of a head scratcher in some ways. This was a pretty strong draft, though, in terms of depth, right? This wasn't a draft that, if you were sort of a fringe guy where the first round was concerned, there was a lot of room for you to maybe move up into the first round. And really, a lot of the narrative with JD at the start of the process was that he was starting out in the first round, as far as projections anyway, whatever those are worth. But I think we had talked about this on multiple occasions. He needed work, and he still needs work. The upside is undeniable in terms of pure athleticism, and he's a good passer at times, but decision making, outside shot, things like that, just maturity in general was very much still in play for him. And so there he goes into the second round. I do like where he went, right? If you're going to go in the second round, go to a really good organization, go to an organization that needs a point guard. When you look at the Celtics and really where their failure came into play in the NBA Finals, is that they didn't have a true point guard, in my opinion. So, maybe not as early as next season, but, in the not too distant future, maybe JD's given the time and allowed to develop in a way that he can become more of that sort of guy for the C's. What were your thoughts?
In terms of the financial decision that J.D. Davison made, I don't think you can argue with it, even though he did go at the end of the draft. You look at the decision. I don't know who wouldn't make the same choice he did, even knowing where he would have gone. And I'm sure he was disappointed. I'm sure J.D. Davison expected to be gone, long gone, before pick number 53. But last year's 53rd overall pick, a kid by the name of Charles Bassey from Western Kentucky University, signed a 3-year deal with the Sixers for $4.3 million. So roughly $1.5 million a season over 3 years for a rookie deal. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Davison's going to get that exact same figure, but you can expect it to be in that neighborhood at least, Travis. And is he ready? No, like you said, we've talked about that. A lot of work to do in terms of decision making and turnovers. I think primarily, but he's gonna be 4.3 mil richer while he's trying to put those skills together. And you could say if he hangs on at Alabama another year, maybe he gets drafted a lot higher. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. Travis. I mean, you hear a lot about one and dones, but are there a lot of great two and done stories? I can't think of a ton of them.
Got to make the team though, right? I mean, once you get out of the first round of the NBA draft, that guaranteed money, in large part goes by the board. So the numbers sound good. No argument here from that perspective. But he's got to make the team, which I know you hear Brad Stevens, you hear the Celtics people talk about JD Davison. What else are they going to say about him on draft night or immediately thereafter? They're going to sound very optimistic about him. And as we talked about, there is very much an opportunity for a player at his position with that potential team. That's why they took him. You got to think in this draft, but still got to make the team. And I think though, if you take JD Davison as a one and done at that point in the draft, you're going into that relationship thinking, okay, we understand what we've got here. We understand he's got a lot of ground to cover, and we're going to be willing to invest time into him. Ultimately, it'll come down to production at some point, but I do think from that standpoint, I don't think the Celtics are going to be quick with the trigger. And JD doesn't come off as a guy that isn't going to give you anything less than his best. So if that was a question mark with JD Davison, I'd have more concerns than I do as it sits right now. But I think his chances of being a Boston Celtic for at least the foreseeable future are pretty good. And look, there's deals that you work with guys where they're G League. That's what I would envision for JD Davison initially, right? Something more along those lines, kind of like a Josh Primo situation. And then, hopefully in time, he's ready to help the Celtics at the top level.
Before we move on and away from basketball, Travis, Nate Oates here in the last week or so as well, said they're just going to sit on an empty scholarship spot. He had some interesting comments on a podcast that he did about it, the Next Round podcast, I believe, had Coach Oates on, and his comments boiled down to a nutshell, Travis, was that I feel like for what was out there, whoever we got, it was going to be a 5-minute a game type of role, and he just didn't feel like he would be doing right by any player to bring him in just for that. Noble on the front end when you look at it from a recruiting standpoint. But Travis, if you're a coach, can that not bite you right in the ass if you end up with 4 injuries next winter?
It could. I think you're also weighing the team dynamic and all of that. If you bring a guy in and you really don't have minutes for him, there's a price you can pay in terms of your locker room and your bench morale that you would rather not probably have to deal with. And, if you feel that good about your 12 and, we can say they've got 12, but Javon Quinterly, who knows, right, when he's going to be ready. So you're going into the season thinking you're going to have 11. Unfortunately for Nate, they've had some off seasons where they've had some catastrophic injuries. Namari Burnett most recently was one of those guys. So James Rojas has been through it. Alex Chiku, who recently transferred out to Rhode Island. So you're right. Your concern is with that. But I think there's also that other side that from the team dynamic perspective, you'd rather probably just roll with 12 that you feel like you can give minutes to if it comes down to it.
Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. Coming at you, we're going to talk a little football on the other half of the show. Really quickly, though, going to thank some sponsors here. We're going to start telling you about North River Dental Associates and that great job that the staff over at North River Dental does for Jack Smalley, the former Alabama football player. Great location right off of McFarland at Watermelon Road at 1100 Fairfax Park. They do all kind of dentistry there, family dentistry, the pediatric dentistry. They got you covered. Porcelain veneers, cosmetic dentistry, laser dentistry, endodontics, dentures, teeth whitening services. They do it all. Also, Botox and Juvederm treatments for those facial features. You got a big event coming up this summer, a wedding you want to look your best for, the teeth whitening, the Juvederm, they get you taken care of over at North River Dental Associates. The phone number, 752-3506. You can also go online to make an appointment with Dr. Jack and his great staff. That URL is northriverdentist.com. Check them out. Get your routine cleanings twice a year like you should at North River Dental Associates.
Going to tell you about Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. Man, I tell you, we talked about the heat earlier, and you think about summer camps. Well, what better place to send your special someone to a summer camp than Peterbrook Chocolatier, 205-752-0211. The spots have filled up extremely quickly, so go ahead and make the call as soon as possible to get your young person involved in those Peterbrook Chocolatier summer camps. Still space available in the near future, so go ahead and do that. And of course, always get by Peterbrook. You know what we're coming up on too, Chase? July. And in July, every Wednesday at Peterbrook Chocolatier, you're going to get a free scoop of gelato. Gelato in July. That's right. Peterbrook Chocolatier on Wednesdays, one scoop of gelato free to you at Peterbrook Chocolatier, Tuscaloosa.
It's the best running air conditioner in town in the summertime.
You got to keep that. You got to keep that chocolate cool, right?
Yeah.
So no doubt. It's going to be cool in there, and the gelato.
Exactly. Yeah. Between the AC keeping the chocolate cool and the gelato, it's a nice little refresher just walking into place.
Absolutely.
All right. Finally, going to tell you about DraftKings. That would be our corporate sponsor. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. That's the Pigskin Podcast Network acronym. They'll get you taken care of only at the DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Travis, moving on now. Football, the schedule. We'll just kind of dive into that a little bit here in the second half of the program. The Crimson Tide going on the road for a big non-conference game that'll be at Texas in Austin. As a matter of fact, I just booked my travel a little early for that here in the last week. Looking forward to be my first time ever covering or seeing a game at all in that stadium. So looking forward to the trip over to Austin. Elsewhere on that road schedule, Travis, which we're going to chat about, they'll be taking on Arkansas and Fayetteville. They'll be at Tennessee, at LSU, at Ole Miss. Your thoughts on that road slate, Travis?
Well, I asked you the question before we went on here. So much talk about the A&M game on October the 8th, and understandably so. In terms of anticipation, there's probably only 2 or 3 other Alabama home games in the last, 10, 12 years that are going to rank with this A&M game. At least that's what we expect going into the season. But if you want to talk about the games that are going to ultimately define Alabama's 2022 regular season, I think you can make a very strong argument for that road slate. Texas in September. Then you get into a 6-week stretch of Arkansas early October. Right after the A&M bloodletting at Bryant-Denny Stadium, you go to Knoxville to take on Tennessee. You get an off week there at the end of October. Then you go to Baton Rouge to take on LSU. And then you kind of flip Ole Miss and Arkansas this year in terms of where they show up on the schedule. Mm-hmm. Ole Miss goes to November. Arkansas goes to early October. We'll see what Ole Miss's roster looks like. That's the concern you have for Lane Kiffin's team that late in the season after they've been through the wars, and what's left of that team in terms of their top 20 to 30 players. But that could be a very challenging situation in Oxford. So, I think it's a road schedule that very formidable. I don't really see exactly a gimme there. I think Alabama will be absolutely favored in each and every one of those games, but I also don't think they are a collection of games in which Alabama can just sort of sleepwalk through at least 2 or 3 of those.
What strikes me about this road schedule, Travis, is I'm not sure I know what to expect out of any of these teams.
Yeah.
I mean, Texas, you don't know what you're going to get with Texas in early September. They'll be playing at home. They're going to be hard to stop offensively. Can they stop Alabama or anybody else? That's going to be the question.
Can they block
Alabama
sure. Too? Yeah.
Can they block them, and can they get to the quarterback?
Right.
Ben Davis led Texas in sacks last year, Travis, with 2.5.
Told y'all.
So who knows what to expect with Texas for sure. At Arkansas, Alabama gets the job done there. That being said, Sam Pittman, one of the best coaches in the league, has that program on the upswing.
It won't be 52-3 like it was 2 years ago in Fayetteville. I don't think either one of us anticipate that.
Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, all 3 of those, I think, are just a little bit hard to pin down. I don't count Tennessee out from being a heck of a team because I'm a big Hendon Hooker guy. I think he's outstanding. I think he's going to have a heck of a year. He did last year, certainly. At LSU, as much turmoil and turnover as that program's been through over the last couple of years, coaching, portal, you name it.
Yeah.
The LSU is going to be back. It's not an if, it's a when. And I don't necessarily think 2022 will be the year because there's some rebuilding that Brian Kelly is going to have to undertake. But that doesn't mean they won't show some quick signs.
They'll still have a roster. I've said before, I think Brian Kelly's first roster at LSU might be able to go toe-to-toe with any of the rosters he had at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that doesn't mean they're going to win 10, 11 games because the schedule's probably not going to be as friendly, I would think. And it is year 1. So there's a lot of things to consider in that regard. But in terms of just roster, I think LSU is going to be pretty formidable. I think they've got concerns like a few of the teams Alabama has on the schedule, and that starts with the offensive line for LSU, maybe as much as any. I think they're going to start a true freshman at left tackle. That's not ideal with Will Anderson lining up at outside linebacker, but otherwise, really across the board, I think LSU has a chance as the season progresses to get better and better in year 1. And that's to the benefit of LSU, I would say, Chase. They don't see Alabama early. They see Alabama later. And so they'll have a chance to maybe get some things figured out. Same thing with Lane in his quarterback situation. If the rest of that roster can remain somewhat whole, Lane should have a quarterback ready by November. Late November, as a matter of fact.
Yes. Speaking of not knowing what to expect, was the final number? I guess maybe we don't even have a final number on Ole Miss portal entries, but 16, I think, or certainly
King of the portal. King of the portal, Kiffin. Yeah. Well, Kelly and Kiffin. When you want to talk about portal, prolificacy this time around, both of them were all over it. I mean, what's crazy about the portal this year, I know we're getting off topic a little bit, but it involves a couple of Alabama's road opponents since we are talking about them. You're going to watch LSU, and you're going to see a couple of the DBs from Arkansas, in all likelihood, starting for LSU this year. And then you're going to see Dwight McGlovern, the corner from LSU, starting for Arkansas. I mean, it's like we had outright trades within the SEC West this year, And then the quarterback situation, Max Johnson now at A&M from LSU. Zach Calzada going from A&M to Auburn. Just in the SEC West alone and the teams that Alabama's going to see, it's pretty nutty.
Those quarterbacks move more than anybody, too.
Oh, yeah. Yes, they do.
So,
yep.
Speaking of quarterbacks, Travis, Bryce Young taking his time, with the Manning Passing Academy over in Thibodaux, Louisiana. That's always a big event for sure. Crazy big event, really. I've been there only one time, but you almost have to see it to understand it. They've got 20 to 30 college quarterbacks there, I guess, is kind of the range they usually bring in. And they're acting as counselors, working with kids and groups of 10 to 15 each on this massive property that accommodates thousands, literally thousands of campers. Mm-hmm. And it's a madhouse. It's quite a scene. But Bryce Young over there at the Manning Pass Academy, these quarterbacks, Young and any of them, they're not going to pass up a chance to spend a couple days with the Manning family and soak up whatever they can.
No doubt about it. It's sort of a status thing too, to be able to, garner that recognition. It's kind of interesting too. Bryce won the Heisman Trophy, but when you talk about kind of how he's viewed in terms of strengths and weaknesses among some of the guys that are also there from Will Levis. It's like we continue to hear how Will Levis of Kentucky is just, moving up and up draft boards as we get ready for the 2022 season. And then, with Bryce, you still hear people, I don't know, he's not the biggest guy. And if you're an Alabama fan, you love it because it's great to have the only thing better than having a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback is a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback back who continues to hear doubts about what he is or what he can do. I mean, that's beautiful if you're Nick Saban.
Ole Miss gets it done in the College World Series.
Oh, how about the beer in Starkville, Mississippi after that?
Yeah.
I mean, you had it for 1 year. Ole Miss.
It's colder than that Knoxville beer. It's colder than the Knoxville beer in Starkville, though.
I think the Knoxville folks are more wine coolerish. They don't even drink beer, Bartles and James or something. You know what they are? They're more wine people. Wine a lot. But no, you're right. Damn. I mean, Mississippi State, it was like Alabama and Auburn, 2009, 2010, right? Yeah. Mississippi State wins the national championship. I think it was the first team national championship in athletic department history at Mississippi State. 1 year later, Ole Miss wins the College World Series. I mean, that's 2009 Alabama, 2010 Auburn in football, if I've ever heard it.
If you're an Ole Miss fan, Travis, an average Ole Miss fan, what would you rather have? The CWS title, which of course has just been earned, or Arch Manning on the football team?
You take the baseball because that hurts. You take the baseball because that hurts State more. Yeah. That hurts your rival. I mean, that does. There's no denying that. I'll tell you, it was interesting that it didn't appear as if the Mannings gave Lane and Ole Miss really much of a look, did they?
It seemed a little cursory, didn't it?
Come on, I mean, nothing for Lane for all this wizardry and quarterback whispering and everything else. Didn't look like the Mannings were all that interested in Archie and Eli and Cuppa's alma mater. I thought that was maybe the most interesting aspect about that. Look, Lane's still going to have a quarterback, though. You know that. Luke Altmaier this year, Jackson Dart. Between those two guys, he's going to figure that out. And they're going to put up numbers. But Arch Manning in Texas kind of had that feel, throughout the process. Texas was a real constant. I think some people were surprised more that it wasn't Georgia, maybe. But for some reason, it just had a Texas Sark. Look at the guys that Eli and Peyton went to play for, right? They went to Tennessee with David Cutcliffe, and Eli went to Ole Miss with Cut. Offensive guys, first and foremost, that they trusted with their development. And I think Peyton was either going to go to Tennessee or Florida. So he was either going to play for David Cutcliffe and an old offensive line coach in Phil Fulmer, or he was going to play for Steve Spurrier. And so Sark makes a lot of sense. Now, we'll see what kind of season Sark has, and Quinn Ewers is there. Maybe Quinn's going to be a 3-and-out guy. I don't know, at the quarterback position, or maybe Arch goes in there and takes care of business regardless. But some very interesting variables in that recruitment, right?
Somebody might as well just throw a couple more million at Quinn to transfer again, right? Just send him to another school yet. So
how about Quinn Ewers at Alabama in 2023 when
right.
Bryce leaves and Alabama plays Texas at Bryant Denny? I mean, what the hell at this point? You know, anything's conceivable with this portal action.
Be a lot of fun for sure. What about, and before we get out of here, Antonio Langham wanted to mention his being named to the College Football Hall of Fame ballot. He's not in, he's not been inducted, but he is on the ballot. He joins Chris Samuels. Really quickly, your thoughts on that, Travis? And when you look back on that 1992, let me pose it to you this way. Well, let's go before Langham was named. To the ballot. Had I asked you who's the handicap favorite from the 92 team to be the first to get a chance, would Langham have been top of your list?
Wow.
Because it's a tough call. You could go a couple directions with that.
Probably not for me. I mean, because to me, the 92 team is synonymous with Curry and Copeland up front.
Right.
So it would have started on defense.
Curry.
Yeah. Maybe Curry or Copeland. I would have been not surprised by. Antonio, a hell of a player, though. I mean, you think about that 92 season. He came up huge against Auburn. Came up huge against Florida, obviously. There was the block punt scenario against Mississippi State. People forget about that Mississippi State game in Starkville in 92.
Yeah.
That was a dogfight, no pun intended. And it took everything Alabama really had in that game. And there was a big punt block in that game that Antonio was involved in that turned into a touchdown, as I recall anyway. So, I'm not going to argue that Antonio didn't have that sort of career. He did. 93, ultimately the way it ended, obviously no one liked. But in totality, his career at Alabama, I think it's certainly worthy.
Yeah, Mississippi State was scrappy with Alabama through quite a stretch there. If you remember, you're talking about 92. How about 94?
Yeah.
When Alabama.
Well, Alabama should have lost that game. Yeah.
They were beat.
In 96, they did. And a lot of people will tell you that was when Beebs basically decided that was a wrap.
Right.
Yeah. In the post game. But
you're right. Maybe the best, or certainly one of the best games ever as a passer for Jay Barker was in that Mississippi State game in 94. They got
Jay's 94 season was really, really good. You got him in there with Homer, working with him and that offense. The Georgia game in 94 in Tuscaloosa is an all-timer.
Yeah. Different quarterback.
Jay was from 92 to 94, not the same guy.
It's going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. I want to thank our listeners and our viewers over on YouTube and Facebook. For Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread of the Tuscaloosa News and Crimson Cover Television. Be sure to join us next time right here on Talkin Tide.